This week, the Republican frontrunner for the presidency of the United States went on trial for fraud and promptly got slapped with a gag order for bad-mouthing the judge's clerk. Well, I won't be spending any time today on that, or much on Biden's only 3 years younger and significantly more indicted GOP challenger, who, as I say, is busy in court. But I do want to spend some time on the new former leader of the Republican Party in the House, because what happened this week on Capitol Hill, serial child molester, according to the judge who sentenced Republican Denny Hastert to prison. Let's be clear, McCarthy lost his job because a Republican, Matt Gaetz, called a vote against him, and then 7 other Republicans joined with Gaetz to vote to remove him, alongside, obviously, every House Democrat who was present. And yet McCarthy spent his first moments as the ex-House Speaker in the exact same way he spent his time as Speaker, blaming his party's pandemonium on the other guys.
I think today was a political decision by the Democrats. Unfortunately, 4% of our conference can join all the Democrats and dictate who can be the Republican Speaker in this House.
It was just another reminder of why McCarthy was so bad. A blameless, feckless leader that enabled the radicalism in his own party that ousted him. Why should Democrats have to come to his aid when he always finds a way to trash them? Including this week, just days after their votes saved his temporary funding bill to avert a government shutdown. In fact, Kevin McCarthy's entire career in Congress stands as evidence for why Democrats should never feel guilty for letting him lose his job. Let's go through Kevin's greatest hits, because they speak volumes about him and about the modern GOP. Back when McCarthy was a desperately ambitious GOP young gun during the Tea Party era, he went on Fox to audition for the Speaker's job with this humble, or some might say dumb, brag.
Everybody thought Hillary Clinton was unbeatable, right? But we put together a Benghazi special committee, a select committee. What are her numbers today? Her numbers are dropping.
The Benghazi probe was all about politics. McCarthy said the quiet part out loud about how Republicans treated the institutions of our government, how they exploited them. And back then he got blasted by both parties for it, dropping out of the Speaker's race. Then, as House Minority Leader during the Trump years, McCarthy bent over backwards to accommodate the lies and casual authoritarianism of the Trump administration, from offering the president jars of his favorite Starburst candies, quote, just the red and pink, to voting with 146 of his GOP colleagues in Congress to overturn, or try and overturn, the 2020 election result, just hours after he had cowered in a secure location during the Capitol insurrection. In fact, McCarthy took to the floor of the House and said this about Trump's role in that insurrection.
The president bears responsibility for Wednesday's attack on Congress by mob rioters.
Only to then lead his House GOP conference against voting for impeachment, and then, just weeks later, going on a pilgrimage to Mar-a-Lago to bend the knee to the former president. With Trump's support, the sycophantic McCarthy finally became Speaker in January. Remember January? 15 rounds of voting. And then kept himself busy blaming Joe Biden for everything, while members of his own caucus endorsed violence against Democratic lawmakers, put out white nationalist talking points, spread anti-vax and anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. To be fair, McCarthy's also done other stuff, like launching an impeachment inquiry against Joe Biden without letting Congress, without letting the House itself vote on it, which was the exact thing he publicly swore that he would never do, just weeks before he did it. This is the guy that Democrats were supposed to run and save? Just look at the first order of business for McCarthy's temporary replacement, Speaker pro tem Patrick McHenry, a North Carolina Republican who immediately got busy attacking Democrats, not Matt Gaetz or the other 7 rebels. In one of his first acts, the petty McHenry ordered senior Democratic lawmakers like Nancy Pelosi and Steny Hoyer to immediately vacate their current offices in the Capitol. Who needs to govern the country when you can punish your rivals? If you still can't grasp how extreme the Republican Party is, look at the slate of candidates who might replace McCarthy as the next House Speaker, like Majority Leader Steve Scalise of Louisiana, who once described himself to a reporter as David Duke without the baggage. Scalise now says he regrets the time he attended a white supremacist conference organized by Duke. There's also House Judiciary attack dog Jim Jordan, the former Ohio State assistant wrestling coach, who's been accused by multiple team members of covering up for a team doctor who sexually abused over 100 students over 2 decades. According to the university, well, Jordan has denied the accounts of those wrestlers. Scalise and Jordan have officially declared their campaigns for Speaker, but another possible candidate is Elise Stefanik, the number 3 Republican in the House. In 2021, moderate-turned-Trumpist Stefanik ran Facebook ads echoing the racist Great Replacement theory that inspired multiple mass shooters, including the Buffalo shooting that killed 13 people, most of them black, in Stefanik's home state of New York. And then, of course, there's the dark horse candidate for Speaker of the House.
Sources telling me at this hour some House Republicans have been in contact with and have started an effort to draft former President Donald Trump to be the next speaker. And I have been told that President Trump might be open to helping the Republican Party, at least in the short term, if necessary.
Donald Trump helping the Republican Party? Donald Trump as Speaker of the House? Even in this GOP, what kind of self-deluded, ill-informed agent of chaos would champion an idea as crazy as that? Ah, right, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who tweeted, "The only candidate for Speaker I'm currently supporting is President Donald J. Trump." The tweet said a lot of other things with a lot of exclamation points, but you get the idea. Technically, Trump can serve because the House Speaker doesn't actually have to be a member of the House. Although technically, maybe he can't, because as more than a few people have pointed out, the House Republican Conference rules for this Congress state that a member of the Republican leadership shall step aside if indicted for a felony for which a sentence of 2 or more years imprisonment may be imposed. And Trump has, well, just a few such indictments. But if we've learned anything, it's that pro-Trump Republicans always follow the rules where Congress is concerned. Face it, giving Donald Trump another job he never earned and isn't qualified to do is the logical dead end for a dishonest, decrepit GOP that long ago got rid of sane leadership and now only dispenses anger and blame. Some of them openly want to make Trump the Speaker? Really? Hilarious. To quote the last guy, bring it on.